So before we get started, I think it would be good to just get, basic background, like talk about where the idea for Morning Brew came from, founding of the company, and, to where it is today, to, making the deal with Insider, and what you're doing now.
Yeah, so Morning Brew started in 2015, actually technically 2014. In 2014, I could tell from my point of view, which was I heard about this not even a newsletter at the time, but a PDF attachment that was going around the University of Michigan that was making the business world more conversational, more interesting. And so I signed up, and it was just that. It was an email sent to a Michigan listserv, where you could sign up, and it was a PDF that was called Market Corner, making the business world more engaging. One day, the writer of that, Alex Lieberman, sent out an email saying, "Hey, I'm looking to take this a step further. Who's interested?" And I saw potential in it. So we joined up, and to make a long story short, we spent winter break of 2014 into 2015 at the University of Michigan working on this. And March 14th, so actually in 2 days, it will be our 6-year anniversary of Morning Brew.
Nice. Congrats.
Thank you. So yes, started as a daily email newsletter. The idea was to empower and educate young business professionals. We quickly learned, or really it was college students at first, and we quickly learned that this could be attractive for young business professionals as well. And that was kind of our aha moment of like, oh, this is bigger than just college students. This is everyone. I was a sophomore, Alex was a senior. He went to go work at Morgan Stanley for a year, and I interned at investment bank. And quickly we realized this is something, we're onto something. We don't know what the potential is here, but there's too much progress to not continue going. So we did. I spent my entire senior year working on it, and then went full time in 2017. We raised a small convertible note, and we were off to the races. And until end of 2018, we did nothing besides write, sell, and grow the daily email newsletter to get it to about 1 million subscribers. We hit 1 million. We had our 1 million party, what's like 2 years ago now. So that was the first couple of years, just a single newsletter and staying hyper focused on one product.
So for that, from 0 to 1 million subscribers, was that just you and Alex working on that?
So we brought on a few people. So 2017, we brought on our first 2 employees. One was in editorial, a writer, and one was a jack of all trades, a little product, a little tech, a little engineering, a little bit of everything. And we quickly grew to another writer. But the growth of people, I think we had like 10 January 1st, I'm trying to go backwards. I know January 1st, 2020, we had 25. So the year before we had 10. So we went from 10, beginning of 20. I'm losing track of the dates now, but we were a very lean team at first. We were 8 to 10 people for a very long time. And, in the last 15 months is when we went from 25 to 86 people.
So I would like to ask how the deal with Insider came to be, like how early stages to where it is today, and what your relationship with the company is, like how Morning Brew operates as kind of a larger part of, or as part of Insider as a larger sort of company.
Yeah, so we started getting a bunch of offers 2018, right, end 2018, and we didn't think they were that interesting, and we had no intention of selling the business. But then Axel, was persistent, and they reached out, and COVID happened, and we have a really big ambition, and we wanted to be aggressive in what we were doing, and having the backing of a large company that's going to allow you to take risks was something that was attractive to us, right? We had no idea if there was going to be a second wave that was going to, affect things, or if there was going, like, who knows with an economic recession. We're in an ads business, and ads businesses are quite volatile, and they're not recession proof at all. I think we are in the grand scheme of media businesses because our ads actually perform. We're not selling billboards, but we're still an ad-based business. And to have the opportunity to have the same ambition, if not bigger, but have some stability and some economic backing was really, really great for us. and something that we came to think, was really important. So we're an independent company, within the Axel Springer family. So own HR, own everything. Not, we don't share anything in terms of staff.
Mhm.
Henry and Claudius are on the board of directors at Morning Brew. And yeah, I mean, we're pretty autonomous in the grand scheme of being owned by a $12 billion company. We're pretty autonomous.
It's good. That's interesting that you managed to keep so much autonomy. You hear, I mean, I look at media acquisitions like, BuzzFeed and HuffPost just this week, and you see kind of the complete opposite of that. So how important was it to you to be able to keep kind of a level of autonomy when you were making the deal with Insider?
It was everything, right? That's what we wanted. It was a requirement.
When you were receiving all these different offers, I guess this sort of plays into the question I just asked about, autonomy within Insider. Um, what made you turn down certain deals and eventually say yes to, the one that you agreed to? If you
Uh,
can.
for us, I mean, obviously price mattered.
Mhm.
And also finding partners who we felt comfortable working with, right? At the end of the day, when you're a media company, you can only sell to one of three entities. You can sell to a vertical integration play, like Hustle just sold to HubSpot. You can sell to a private equity company, and you can sell to a media conglomerate. There are pros and cons of all three. The pros of selling to a vertical integrated, like HubSpot or a Robinhood or anything like that, is they could have the highest willingness to pay
Mhm.
because the LTV of their products are really high, and they don't own their audience, and they have quite high revenue multiples on the business. So in theory, they could pay the most, but there are cons. They may not value everyone at your company, and so they may have to make some adjustments in who's at the company. Private equity probably will pay the lowest multiple, and then they're very focused on EBITDA and not focused as much on growth oftentimes. And there's the media conglomerate, which is kind of in the middle. And so we spoke to people in all three of those buckets, and we had the most comfort. And also, it's a two-way street, right? To sell a business, obviously, the other party has to be interested. And so, of everyone, we thought Axel Springer was the best business to sell to.
How do you view Morning Brew kind of fitting into the media world? Or do you view yourselves as, a media company? Do you view yourselves as a tech startup? Like, what's sort of how do you sort of file yourself into, these categories, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really worry about labels so much. We're a media company, right? But I think media and commerce and it's all converging. And we will absolutely look to, at some point, launch a subscription service,
Mhm.
or launch something that will get direct revenue from our user, whether it's a subscription or a one-off paid thing. For us, it's about the best business model for us, right? So of course, subscription is great in general, but if your product isn't a subscription product, well, then you shouldn't have a subscription, right? Like if your product is best as a one-off thing, you should sell it one-off. You should do what's best to the customer. Um, but but yeah, I mean, for us, we're going to explore a lot of different revenue opportunities, but we still see so much room to go in the ad-based business that we're not in a rush. We want to get this right and then expand. We don't want to try to do everything. We're already trying to do a lot within the media, within trying to build our audience. And so we don't want to also get into commerce and subscription and everything in the same year. It's just too much.
Mhm. So it's really interesting. You keep talking about Morning Brew as an ad-based business, and going through journalism school, I kept hearing all the time from all these people, the ad-based model of journalism or of media in general, is dying out. TV ad money is going away, banner ads on websites, like it just doesn't make as much money. And I talked about the switch that all these newsrooms are making to newsletters. A lot of those were paid. I look at something like TechCrunch is Extra Crunch. It's not, TechCrunch runs ads, but Extra Crunch is just purely a subscription based, uh, ad free revenue source for TechCrunch. Um, So, I mean, there's all this talk about how the ad-based media business doesn't work anymore, and yet Morning Brew has been able to succeed greatly using an ad-based business model. So I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, about why you think it works for you when it doesn't work for, traditional sites or even competitors.
Yeah, so I don't think ad-based businesses are bad businesses. Is that the best business model in the world? No, of course not. But it works. What I think is probably overriding that narrative is the fact that a lot of these businesses aren't well run. They're overcapitalized, they're inefficient, they don't truly have a real audience. So if you don't have a real audience, you definitely can't monetize through subscriptions. So you're going to try to monetize through advertising. And people don't want to spend money, or your CPMs are low because no one's really engaging. And all of a sudden, people are like, oh, ad businesses aren't good. But a lot of these businesses out there, they're ad businesses, could be good businesses if they didn't have to live up to the valuations that on the capital they raised in 2016, 2017. So, I don't really want to speak in generalization. You can dive into a company, but I think a lot of these companies out there are actually good companies. They just have awful cap tables. And by the way, it's unfortunate, right? Because a lot of times people are getting laid off and these companies are struggling because of mistakes, and obviously not intentional mistakes, but mistakes that execs made years ago that really hurt their ability to succeed, today.
So, off the top of my head, I can think of several companies that media companies that have gone through kind of the ringer of acquisitions and mergers and things like that, and have ended up in sort of a rough state today. The first one that comes to mind is Geo. Gawker, which became Gizmodo, which now is Geo. And if you look at those sites, those are ad-based, businesses, or it's an ad-based business overall, I should say. And if you look at those sites now, you read an article on that site, and over the years it's changed from, ads are there to the ad is sort of dominating the page, and you see writers at that site and you see readers of that site complaining about how it's become really difficult. Like the user experience has become really bad. So how, I mean, of course you'd be cautious of things like that, right? Of course you wouldn't want the reader experience of your newsletter to be a negative one, but how do you sort of find the balance between the content of your newsletters and the parts of it that generate revenue?
Yeah, I mean, it's something we think a lot about. It's a very careful balance to get that right. There's no right or wrong answer. What I will say is I think the comparison to some of those other companies may not, and I'm not saying you were comparing, but it's not a great one, because if you don't really have an audience, right? If you just, people come to your site because they find you in a Google search or whatever else, and you're not providing utility to them, you're just like, it's content. Well, you don't have an audience. And so people aren't more likely to click on your advertisements than any other advertisement. And you're just monetizing through standard programmatic. And so, yeah, that game is a race to the bottom, right? Mm-hmm. When your ad units are actually added, can be additive to the content. Sometimes our ad units have 5 or 6% click-through rates. That's incredible. It just shows that we're working with the right companies. We have the right message. It's on brand. And our audience actually at times finds it useful to get recommendations from us. And so it really does depend on how engaged the audience is, how much they trust what you say, things like that.
And I notice a couple things that Morning Brew does that I think are really interesting. And one of the primary things is, presence of the brand outside of just the product. So I see what Morning Brew does on Twitter and what you and other members of the company do on Twitter. And I think it's really interesting. I think you've almost kind of built around yourself or around your colleagues sort of personas, or a strong personality on Twitter, I should say, that keeps people coming back or builds like a familiarity with the brand that may not have been there otherwise if you were just kind of like the voiceless COO or co-founder that appeared in a Google search but didn't have a presence anywhere. So I want to ask if there is a sort of concerted effort at the company or among like a few members of the company to really have a strong social media presence that isn't just the brands. It's not just the Morning Brew Twitter. although that also has like a very strong voice and personality that I think people relate to. But how important is it to you and to the team overall to have sort of individual presences?
So, I mean, it's incredibly important. That's where we're going, right? We're going to a place where we are going to have an army, as I like to call it, of personalities, right? We're gonna leverage the Morning Brew brand to help accelerate and push their content forward. And so, to take a step back, what I didn't get to is the plan for the future is just to do two simple things. They're simple, but they're not easy, right? The first thing is to make people smarter and better at their job. And that's what we're doing in the B2B business, right? That's retail brew, it's marketing brew, it's anything else we launch in that business, it's emerging tech brewers we have. And that's part one. Part two is the B2C business. And we're going to take the Morning Brew consumer, who right now we service with mostly news one time a day, and we're going to start to think about what are the other things that that person would like from us. Personal finance, productivity, investing content. We do recommendations with our Sidekick newsletter. All of that is all going to incorporate personalities and people. So does the B2B business, but even more so in the B2C. And so for us, personalities are huge. It's incredibly important.
Um, on that note, talking about the Morning Brew Twitter account itself, something that I notice that it does, and that I think a lot of new and succeeding or successful rather media operations are doing is kind of using the language of the platform, if that makes sense. If you look at a page like the New York Times or something like that, it's just kind of boldly posting articles, and sure, they have a different content pipeline and format than something like Morning Brew, but it's sort of emotionless. And when I see Morning Brew, even more so than when I see something like a huge national brand like KFC that tweets like memes and stuff like that, I really see Morning Brew engaging with sort of the language that I see regular users use on Twitter. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the social media strategy and how it's paid off.
Yeah, I mean, it started very organically, right? It's something we're working through now, but it started, I mean, at the end of the day, like your social media managers are people, and you need to lean into that. And if you don't have so much hierarchy and process for creating social content where it needs to be viewed by 100 people, it can actually come off sounding like a person. And so, absolutely, like I said, I want you to go on Twitter and get your business news content from Morning Brew. I want you to get your tips on entrepreneurship from my co-founder, Alex. I want you to get stories from me on how to start and grow an early stage business. I want you to get content from Toby, our social media manager, on building social, someone else on productivity, someone else on investing. And those are people, right? At the end of the day, people resonate and empathize and listen to people, not brands. Brands can augment, but at the end of the day, we really want people, not just the brand. Yeah, I mean, right now it's early days, right? But the brand clearly has grown a ton. People just, you can feel it, right? You can't measure it per se, although we have sold some ads on, Twitter and on Instagram and on social. So it's working from a monetary perspective. But like, to say we're in the first inning is saying we've done too much, right? And so we're such early days for what we can do in multimedia, on audio, on social, in video. And I think you're gonna look back in 3 years and be like, oh wow, like people thought Morning Brew in 2020, 2021 was like big, but that was like nothing. That was one product. And we're gonna have the same impact we had on newsletters on social media. And that's when we'll be like a really successful, like that's when we will have gotten to where we want to be.
So something I'd like to sort of pick your brain about is not just what the future of Morning Brew looks like, but the future of online media in general, if you have any insights about it. I see things like, I spend a lot of time thinking about journalism business models, media business models, because I'm in this world and it just fills my brain. But I've seen multiple times a shift to things like crowdfunding. You see uh, journalists leave places and start a YouTube channel and then start a Patreon and fund themselves like that. Now you're seeing the same thing happen in Substack, and every time there's kind of this conversation of Patreon is going to save journalism, Substack is going to save journalism, and I always have trouble believing that when it just seems like crowdfunding again. And then I see, all these mergers and acquisitions happening and staff shrinking and, layoffs at almost every site, you could name. Um, and then in the midst of kind of all this strange decay of legacy media, um, I see things like Morning Brew rising. So I'm wondering where you see the direction of this industry headed, how you see Morning Brew fitting into it in the long term.
I think there's like two separate parts, right? There's the capital J journalism part, and then
Yeah.
there's like media and content in general. I do think journalism's in trouble. The business model is not one that works for most people. It works if you're the New York Times, and it works if you're super niche. But I've never been more optimistic about media as a whole, right? People ask me what's going to be successful, Twitter or Substack or this, and the answer is yes. It's everything, right? Everyone's gonna be successful in different ways, but the world is so much better when we have millions of content creators, right? The whole world's going more niche because when you have zero marginal cost, zero cost to create content, the economics change completely. And you go from a world of, like going back to like the printing press, right? Like, not that like real true abundance. Like we have like unlimited abundance. It's not like, we're distributing newspapers. It's like you have actual abundance. You can reach anyone, anywhere in the world with the click of a mouse. So it's going to be about being the best and as niche as possible. And so it's going to be really cool. Like we're already seeing this where it's like, it's not just people who work at news organizations, but people are news organizations now. And you have these individual creators. A guy who works at Morning Brew, Jacob Donnelly, writes a paid newsletter on the media space. And Webb Smith writes an awesome one in the commerce direct to consumer space. But it's more than just that. There are all these, and I think that's the future of media. Again, not the future of journalism, the future of media is not, Substack's vision, I believe, is not to poach a million journalists from the New York Times. It's to create a million new content creators. And that's a really exciting world where we have people creating content in their area of expertise, whether it's audio, video, YouTube, Substack, whatever works for them and their content. Like to me, that's a really exciting world to be a part of.
You see there's going to be a dramatic rise in content creators. Do you see like the current model of journalism coexisting with that?
So here's the tough part. The tough part is a lot of these content creators can't do their job without journalists.
Mm.
So most of them are do analysis. They don't do original reporting. And if you don't have the content reported on, then you can't do your analysis. Now, I don't have an answer for that. Like I don't have a solution.
Right.
I do think the big players are going to get bigger. I think the Times can get much, much bigger. I think the Post is going to get bigger. I think the middle of the barbell is in big trouble, big trouble. And I think that barbell is actually, more narrow. Like what really is at the top end of the barbell? Is BuzzFeed there? Is Vox there? Like, I don't know. Like, it's going to be really tough for these companies. But the top will always be, the Times is going to have a place to be, even if they fund their journalism through recipes and games. They will be there. But this whole ecosystem all relies on journalists doing their job. So there is an issue here that we will have to solve.
How do you, as an employer, avoid the situation that you're seeing a lot of traditional media go through now, or even online media, where you have journalists who rise to great prominence and have loyal readers, and then decide, thanks to the Times or thanks to Morning Brew, I've grown my own personal audience big enough that now I can break off and start my own Substack, and I don't have to be attached to the company. Like how are you thinking about that, and if you are, how do you are you interested in keeping those people kind of with the company or attached?
Yes, I think I think about it a lot. Yes, to answer that question, it's a two-part answer. To me, what we're doing is we have to create this flywheel such that we can add so much value to a creator that they feel a need to stay at Morning Brew. We add them, we provide distribution, we provide them audio, video editing, we provide them a salary, provide them, we can monetize them in 7 ways. They can only monetize in 1. Therefore, we can monetize their whole platform more, so we can pay them more if they run their own. And we have to do all these things to make us a really attractive option compared to going out on your own. With that being said, there are going to be people who, no matter what we do, they can go out on their own and make enough money where they just don't care. Do I worry about that? Sure, but that's a good problem to have, right? If we get to a place where we're developing so many people who are so big they can all go out on their own, and if we can't ensure that they add more value to the ecosystem when they leave than when they came in, well, that's on us, right? We have to make sure that, Morning Brew is not just giving off our brand to them, but they're bringing their brand to Morning Brew, and they're bringing their audience to Morning Brew, and they're driving people to our newsletters and other properties, and all our creators are working together. So yeah, of course it sucks when you lose a creator, but if you lose a creator for the right reasons, you're doing okay. You're actually pretty damn good. That's I would love to have that problem where we're losing creators because they have this really difficult decision of staying at Morning Brew or making way more money going out and doing their own podcast or their own newsletter.
Mm-hmm. I talked to Alex Cohen, and he comes from a fintech background. And if you asked him, even right now, with all these companies making millions and millions of dollars that are in the fintech space, if you ask him, is now a good time to start a fintech company? He pretty strongly argues no. He's like very adamant that even though I've had success doing it, I don't recommend that people do this. So I want to throw the question to you. Do you think now, with the media landscape and the way that it is in the middle of this big shift, is now a good time to start a media company?
Yes, it's a great time to build an audience, a great time to start a media company. What kind of media company, what your ambitions are, all those things factor. I don't necessarily agree with Alex. I think it's always a good time. If you have a good idea and you can execute, it's never a bad time to do something, right? Because maybe it'll take you another year or 2 years longer until the market turns, but things go in cycles. People will fund things, people won't fund things. People will buy things, people won't buy things. But to me, it's always a good time to start things. I started a rolling fund, an angel fund, for the purpose that I think it's a great time to start things. It's awesome. There's so many incredible people out there building great companies.